Did you know that it takes on average 1 to 5 years of onset before someone receives treatment for their mental health illness?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to giving a voice to those of us in the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. I want to ask you guys a question before we jump into today's episode. Do you struggle with mental health? Do you also have a physical disability? Well, if so, this episode is for you because not only do I have someone that struggles with mental health, he also has a physical disability and he's also certified in mental health and first aid. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Jones. Roy, I'm so happy to have you on Nick Speaks. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks again for having me. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. Roy, we have kind of a history. We met on TikTok, and for those of you who don't know, I have a wonderful following over there on TikTok. You can watch that over at Nicholas Comstock on TikTok, and Roy also has a TikTok too called Roy Jones on Wheels, and he does a lot of inspirational stuff. And Roy hit me up one day and said, "Hey, I think we could be a good team. We could collaborate." So we've been talking for, what is it, a year or two now?
Yeah, it's been about a year or so, almost a year, if not a little over.
A little over a year, and I'm really excited. Now, this will have already taken place when this episode airs because I pre-record a lot of my episodes. But tomorrow, for the first time, Roy and I are going to meet in person for lunch. So I'm so excited about that. And I can't wait to meet you in person. We're going to have some good food, some good conversation. So, so excited about that to go eat some good grub with you. Okay. So, Roy, tell the listeners and the viewers of Nick Speaks a little bit about yourself. You're in mental health, you have a disability, so feel free to start wherever you want and tell us a little bit about Roy Jones.
Yeah, so Roy Jones, I'm actually a resident of Ohio. My career was originally in IT, doing tech support, and I feel like God has called me to the mental health community. My mental health journey started in 2007 uh, when I had a mental health crisis. And where I'm at today is in a much better place than I was in 2007. See, I'm in a wheelchair. I have cerebral palsy. Um, and so I advocate for those with a disability, those dealing with chronic pain, and those with a mental health disorder. What that looks like is I get people connected with resources, counseling. If they're in crisis, I provide mental health first aid and get them to the appropriate resources.
Cool. What you guys may not know is that I am also an Ohio native. Roy and I don't live too far from each other, and we're both in the Columbus area, so that's really cool. Roy, what do you think the biggest misconception is when it comes to people with mental health?
I'd say that it's that they think we're crazy or we are attention seeking or we are demonized. I think that's the biggest thing is that people think we're demonized and we're not capable of living a successful life.
You know, that's interesting you say that because I think the demonetization comes a lot from the Pentecostal field, especially. And I go to a Pentecostal church, so I can say that I have a little bit of background in that. There was a lady that used to go to my church where I go to now, and they told her that according to her, they told her that she was demon possessed. I don't know if that's actually true, but the fact that you bring that up, that a lot of people think it's a demon possession of some sort, or they try to demonize it, it's not. Believe it or not, people don't like to put it out there, but there are people in the Bible that struggled with depression. I believe Job struggled with depression, especially when everything was taken from him in one day. King David struggled with depression, in my belief. Now he brought the depression on himself, through his sin and through what he did. But he said in the Bible, David said one of his statements that he made was, "I water my couch with my tears." To me, that seems like a pretty depressed man. And so when people come up to me and say, your mental health is a sin, depression is a sin, well, what are you going to go tell King David? I even think Jesus went through some of that in the Garden of Gethsemane when he prayed, "Lord, let this cup pass from me." And he sweated drops of blood. Some people equate that to severe depression. I don't know what you think about that. I'd love to know.
I mean, I don't think the Bible specifically talks about depression, but you know, how could how could you not be depressed going through everything that Job went through and King David? How could you not be depressed? I mean, I think it would be impossible to not be depressed.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people think that Job was rebuking his wife harshly when she said, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" I don't think he was rebuking her. I think he was just, "Hold on a second. I know, you're speaking crazy because we just went through a lot of crazy stuff, but let's slow down and take a breath. We'll be okay." You said you think people deem people with mental health as crazy. When you had your mental health crisis in 2007, how long did it take you to get somebody to believe that you were actually going through something and that it wasn't in your head?
Well, I think I hid it for so long, and I actually hid it in um working all the time because I was working overtime as much as I could. And then when I had my crisis, I'm planning my um I don't know if we need to try to filter the word, but you know, plan my suicide. Um,
Yeah.
my my family wasn't very supportive. Um, they they told me that I was crazy. I would never be able um to hold a job. It would follow me forever. I think it took my grandmother, um, the longest time to adjust to it because I think in their generation, if you have mental health, you just sweep it under the rug. But I think, over the next couple of years, I think she slowly understood where I was coming from when she stopped to consider everything I went through in my childhood.
Do you think with what you went through with your family, because I know you told me off air, you went through some pretty rough stuff. Do you think what you went through with your family contributed to your mental health
Oh,
crisis 2007?
definitely. Because at that time I was dealing with flashbacks. I was dealing with, now what I know as hallucinations at times. It would and voices, things like that. So I definitely think or I know that it contributed to my mental health crisis. To share a fun fact, if I may,
Absolutely.
did you know that it takes on average 1 to 5 years of onset before someone receives treatment for their mental health illness? It's actually
1 to 5 years.
it's actually closer to the 5 year mark.
Wow.
It's actually something that we learned in the mental health first aid training, is that it takes 5 years from the date of onset. That's just average.
To
You know,
get help, like to
yeah,
actually get
yeah.
counseling.
Well, to actually decide that they want to reach out and get treatment. So yeah, I mean, but obviously it took me longer than 5 years. I didn't start again addressing my issues until 2007. By then, I was an adult, and looking back, I think my actual issues or challenges, I hate to say issues, I think it should be referred to as challenges,
Right.
started at the age of 8 to 9 years old.
Wow. So, did you grow up? Did you grow up? Because I know I did not grow up with a very supportive atmosphere as far as my future, what I was going to be able to do, what I was not going to be able to do. I mean, basically, it was just, Nick, you're not going to be able to do this. You're never going to have a normal life. You're never going to live on your own. Did you grow up with that kind of same atmosphere and that kind of same attitude around you? And how did you handle that?
So ironically, before I became an adult, it was always you can do anything that you put your mind to. Um, there's no such thing as can't. You know, can't is not in your dictionary. And then as I got older and started to, like around the age of, 17, 18, start to talk about, moving out and wanting to get a job, then all of a sudden it was, you're not going to be able to live on your own. You're going to need support all the time. You're going to need 24-hour caregivers. My birth mother said I was going to have to live with her. And in fact, right before I moved out, you know, she tried to convince me to move with her. So
Oh.
it was kind of a reverse thing, if you understand.
I exactly understand that because even when I was younger, I kind of had that same, like, you can do it. But at the same time, and then when it came time to put the you can do it into practice, it was like, we don't think so. I mean, I
Yeah,
was told at the very young age of 15 that I would never get married, never have a wife, never do all the things that I'm doing now
yeah.
simply because of my disability.
Mm.
But now that you say that, it was always younger, God can do anything. And then all of a sudden, God fell off the throne and it was somewhat interesting. Did your birth mother at the time give you a talk and did she say anything like, now once you move out, you can't come back? Did she say anything like that?
No, not that I can recall. I mean, I told her as I got older that I was, moving in with my grandmother, and I don't think that she believed me. I think she thought I would always be wherever she was at.
My parents too.
I spent the majority, once I got older, probably like 10, 11, 12, and onward. I spent the majority of my time with my grandparents. I was only home for, during school, like during the week, and then on Fridays, I would go spend the rest of my time with my grandparents. And then on summer and spring breaks. So,
Yeah, grandparents are a wonderful thing. Mine have always been a wonderful support. I lived in Indiana for the first 25 years of my life, so they were
yeah.
far away for a long time, and now they're about an hour and a half away from me. But yeah, grandparents have always been a wonderful support for me too.
I've always said, my grandparents pretty much raised me. They're the ones that taught me the things that I know. I don't, recall my birth mother really teaching me a whole lot. I guess if the one thing she taught me, because of her not being around as much, she taught me that forced me to to learn how to be independent. So if she taught me anything, it was how to fend for myself.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing as far as my family and my parents too. And I mean, they were constantly telling me, you can't, you won't, this won't happen. And it gave me, even though it irritated me because I didn't have that support, it gave me the drive where I am today. And so I feel that completely. At the beginning of the episode, Roy, we talked about how you're certified in mental health and first aid. What drove you to do that?
Yeah, and to clarify, the certification is called mental health first aid.
First aid. Okay, so
Yeah,
together.
yep,
Okay.
yep. Um, so I have a passion for helping those in crisis because I think there's not a lot of people that know how to help folks in crisis. I do want to clarify though, just so folks get an understanding, having the training in mental health first aid does not give me the ability to diagnose and treat. It simply means that I can watch for potential issues or challenges for someone before they become an issue, and I can help them through a crisis and try to de-escalate. But in no way do I have the ability to diagnose and treat.
Yeah, that's good to put that out there. You're not a doctor, you're not able to give diagnosis, but you are able to say, hey, I'm seeing some of the signs that I went through. Here's what I would do if I were you. You're able to be kind of a helping hand as far as that goes.
I
Um,
look at it as being a first responder type deal.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have people, since you become certified to do the mental health first aid, do you feel like because of your physical disability, not only because of your physical disability, but your mental health, that people, even though you're certified to do these things and you're certified to help people and give them resources or point them to resources, not necessarily give them to them, but point them to resources. Do you feel like some of your colleagues treat you with kid gloves or have in the past? And how did you deal with that?
Um, I'd say the not so much the colleagues, but I mean, some of the folks that I encounter, sometimes they think because I'm in a wheelchair or have a disability that I'm not capable of still providing them the resources that they need. However, the majority of folks that I encounter are very receptive to the support that I provide.
That's awesome. That's great. Great to hear. So how does you and I are both Christians. I've made that well known on my podcast that I'm a born again Christian. How does your faith in God play a role in working with folks in mental health?
Well, it's no secret. I don't hide the fact that I am a believer of Christ. I share that it's because of Christ that I've been able to really overcome a lot of the mental health struggles. And I always remember that I'm not providing a service to others for myself. I'm doing it for Christ. Christ has to come first. I can't put myself first and then put Christ second, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Christ should always be the center of everything that a believer does
Absolutely.
on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And people look around and wonder what's going on in the world. It's because Christ has been pushed out of everything. It's been
Yeah.
pushed out of
He
our public schools, been pushed out of everywhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's out of the public schools. I mean, in fact, if you even talk about it half the time, from what I've heard, you're stopped or you're shunned, from talking about Christ in the public schools because they're worried about offending people. That's the world that we've come to. Everybody's afraid to be offended, you know. And I think people better wake up. I think if they don't wake up, they're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, very, very rude awakening. So, what are some things would you say that that mental health is still a struggle for you? And what are some things that you do to help deal with your mental health issues?
It is still a struggle, but it's not as nearly of a struggle as it was before I got, resaved. Um, you know, some of the things one of the biggest things that I do when I find myself struggling is opening the Bible and reading the Bible. If you actually read the Bible, you can find a lot of solutions to your problems. And I always feel closer to God when I'm reading His Word and listening to His music, worship music and whatnot. I'm very cautious about the music that I ingest, because the music that we listen to, if we're not careful, can impact our mental health.
It absolutely can. Especially that high driving heavy metal almost kind of. Now, if you're a metalhead out there, don't write me. I don't. It doesn't bother me that you're a metalhead. I'm just from my
Yeah.
perspective.
I personally, metal is one genre that I've never been able to. That's the one thing I don't think I can tolerate. It just drives my head bonkers. Like I just can't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
That and opera.
Yes. And you and I go to church. We have plenty of opera singers or should I say, wannabe opera singers in the church who think they can get up and sing opera and sound wonderful. And it's just like, please, can we have the sermon and get out of here?
I mean, thankfully, I don't have anyone in my church that does opera. I mean, if I did, that's fine, but thankfully I don't have to hear that.
What do you say to those? What do you say to Christians? Yeah, thankfully, I don't have to hear that either. What do you say to those Christians who say you shouldn't take medication for your mental health and you using medication is not depending on God? And what is your message to those people who believe that?
I mean, to put it simple, it's hogwash. It's hogwash. I say, you know, it is perfectly okay to use medications. I know that there's churches that are strongly against it. And again, it's hogwash. And if you need to use medication, go for it. But I highly encourage you to lean more on your faith, Christianity. There's only, you know, one way to Christ, one way to heaven, and that's through Jesus Christ. But really rely on your faith. I take one medication for my mental health, one, and it is my goal to not be on it for the rest of my life.
But if you are, do you feel any condemnation or any judgment from God if you just happen to end up on it?
A- Absolutely not. I don't see anywhere in the Bible, and if anyone wants to provide feedback, go for it. But I don't see anywhere in the Bible that it says we can't use medications.
Well,
Now, I will say that it does say that we should be sober minded.
yeah.
So I it you know so I don't believe that you should drink. And that is something that my church also preaches against is, you know, no drinking because it can hinder your thought process
Your thoughts. Yeah.
and and also can lead to additional sin if you think about it
Yes.
because you make decisions that you probably wouldn't normally make if you were sober.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you mentioned that scripture about being sober-minded, and in order for some of us to do that, why would you sit in judgment of somebody who takes a medication to give them a clear mind?
Right.
Because sometimes that's the thing that can help them be sober-minded is medication. I've been on depression medication for I don't know how long, probably since 2016, long time. And before that, I was, biting myself on my hand, giving myself bite marks, ready to snap at anybody who just looked at me the wrong way. And then once I started taking the medication, probably within one or two doses, I was calmer, I was happier, the panic attacks decreased. Yeah.
That's a blessing if you started feeling a difference within 1 to 2 doses because it can typically take 2 to 4 weeks for an antidepressant to work. So if, and with that, if you are someone that is, trying out antidepressants, give it some time to actually work before you say this isn't working because it can take
Yeah.
2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, because everybody's body is different, and my body is we could just have a whole episode on how my body is weird. And because I was in the hospital a couple weeks ago and I had kidney stones, but the side that the kidney stones were on, the pain was not registering on that side. It was registering on the opposite. So, yeah, my body's weird like that. So you lead a couple different support groups or go to a couple different ones. What are some of the topics that are covered in those support groups?
So yes, you are correct. I do lead two peer mental health support groups at a local mental health hospital. And we don't really have topics that we cover. Typically what we do is we go around and do a check-in. So folks will share like what their anxiety's been like in the past week, what their depression is, um, if they've had any suicidal ideation, or any, kind of just do a check-in to let us know how you're doing overall. If there's things and struggles that we have going on, we try to help each other out and guide each other through those challenges.
Yeah. So, what what made you join a mental health group, your first mental health group? And did you struggle to join one because of what people might say or think of you?
No, so I started out with my own treatment that I was getting. I went to what's called IOP, or also known as inpatient or intensive outpatient programming. And then from there, once you graduate, you're eligible for what's called an alumni group. So that's how I got into the support groups. Yeah, I was a little nervous, as with anything, but it didn't last long because even though we're in the group for different reasons, some with depression, some with substance use disorder, we all are going through the same thing in a sense. We're all struggling with something. So no,
Yeah.
it really didn't bother me a whole lot.
So, what does your church say in particular about your mental health work?
I mean, they're, I mean, they haven't really said much about it.
Are they supportive? I guess is what I'm trying to.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'd say they're supportive. Um, it seems like the church that I go to now, at first when I started there, it didn't seem like they were supportive of mental health at all. But I feel like over time of, going there and voicing my thoughts on mental health, and they know where I stand with it. I feel like they've been more open with it and not judgmental of those with mental health. It's hard to find the words right now.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. It's just you and I having a conversation. We're good. So, and what a lot of Christians fail to understand is that the Bible talks about renewing your mind, and
Hmm.
that can come with good biblical solid counseling who, they know renewing your mind is important. They know about the mental health breaks that you may need to take and all that stuff. And for those of you who are like, well, I'm in the church, nobody knows if I'm in counseling. Nobody knows that I'm in counseling, and if they find out, I would get kicked out of the church. Well, that's a church you probably shouldn't be a part of.
Correct. I mean, if you've got a church that is strongly against you getting mental health treatment, turn around and run. Run as fast as you can. If you're in a wheelchair, wheel as fast as you can.
Bro,
Get out of there and don't look back.
yeah,
And I'm sure folks from my church will watch this, but they will always know where I stand. Again, if you're, going to a church that is strongly against you getting treatment, run and don't look back.
yeah, because believe it or not, even though they won't probably admit it to you, your church leaders who are so strongly against mental health are probably getting mental health help outside of the pulpit. They'll just never tell you that.
Well, I mean, and not even so much that. I mean, they may not be getting treatment, but I guarantee you that pastors have mental health struggles, even if
Oh,
they choose
absolutely.
not to admit it, because um, of all the things, like being a pastor is more than just getting up on a Sunday, and preaching a message. It's about listening to the things that your congregation is struggling with, um, you know, and they are not supposed to share what they hear. So same with me, I can't share what folks share with me. So that's a lot on their mind. You know what I mean? So.
Right. But the reason why I just laughed, ladies and gentlemen, because he said pastors aren't supposed to share what they know about other people. But what's funny is, a pastor's favorite subject, in my opinion, to preach on is gossip. Well,
Mhm.
you know where they get most of their gossip from? The counseling sessions they sit at, and then they use it as sermon illustrations.
I mean, I've seen that, and there is, I mean, I'm just gonna put it out there. There's a lot of gossip in the church. Um, you know, there's just a lot of gossip in the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've always said, if you want to get some counseling and you want counselors that are tied legally to keep their mouth shut,
Mhm.
don't go into the church. That may make some people very upset, but it's just the truth.
Yeah.
And Roy, I see you shaking your head up and down, so I would assume that you agree with that. And it's sad that we have to say that because
Yeah.
the church is supposed to be the place where the most broken of the broken can come
Hmm.
and find love and find acceptance. And a lot of times, the church, when it comes to mental health, or if someone in the church messes up and goes in sin, the church is the first one to throw that person out and say, we don't want you. But
Hmm.
then we turn around on Sunday and Wednesdays and say, God is all loving and accepting.
Yeah.
So we're
And
fine.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Um, and I have spoken to um, you know, spiritual staff or pastors and whatnot. and it's supposed to be in confidence, and then you find out that it has actually been leaked. And how do you normally find out? How do you think you normally find out that it's been leaked? Can you guess?
When you're sitting there in the service and they say, a young person in a wheelchair talked to me today, and you're the only one in the building. At least that's how I found out. That's in a
Yeah,
wheelchair.
yeah. I've never had that happen, thankfully. But, I've had others come to me and be like, yeah, so I heard this. And I'm like, well, I only told one person that. So
Yeah. So, what do you say to someone out there right now who is watching or listening to this? Remember, you guys can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Nicholas Comstock on YouTube. What do you say to someone who's watching this or listening to this, maybe on their way home from work or while they're getting ready from work or what school or what have you? What do you say to someone who is struggling with mental health, but they're afraid to get help? Maybe they're afraid to get help just because of the stigma that we talked about in the beginning of the episode. Maybe they're not even involved in church, and church is not a concern for them. It's not a concern for them to be judged at the church house because they're going and getting counseling outside of the church house. What do you say to someone that knows they need help, but they're afraid to get it?
I say, please, get the help that you need. Even if you're judged, it's more important for you to get the help that you need because you are deserving of that help. You are loved and you are worthy, getting help, and you deserve to live a positive lifestyle, a free lifestyle. And I really encourage you to reach out. Don't worry about being judged, no matter what you do, someone's always going to judge you for something.
Yeah. Someone's going to judge me how this podcast is ran
Mm.
today and how we kind of went all over the map a little bit. But that's just how I run things. I want people to come and be comfortable.
It's common for me, and I really don't care anymore, but it's common for me to be judged for my voice, sometimes my speech. But that is all tied to cerebral palsy. It's not something I can control. I'm a
Yeah.
firm believer of you either like me or you don't. I mean,
Yep.
I don't care.
Yep. And if you go to someone for mental health and they shame you, just like we said with the church, run, go get some other help. Because someone who shames you right off the bat when it was scary for you to reach out for help in the first place does not need to be someone who has your mental health in their hands. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think something important to know for those that are maybe just wanting to reach out for the first time, you may get a counselor that doesn't, you two don't jive. All right. So it may take you 2 to 3 to 4 counselors
yep,
before you find the one that you want. That's
yep.
okay. It is a typical part of the process. I've had some crappy counselors in the past. I'm blessed, to have the one that I have now. Actually, I've had him since he first started at the agency where I get my counseling. And
Wow.
we've, it's been interesting and rewarding to see him grow from where he first was, when he first started. So I feel like we've jived really well.
You know what? That's really good. I'm not trying to make this a 3-hour Joe Rogan episode. I want to ask you a couple more questions before we go. No hate to Joe Rogan. Hey, if you ever want to come on the show, let me know. I want to ask you a couple more questions because you said, you've been with your counselor since you started counseling. And how has your relationship developed with him? And how do you guys, because you're obviously talking about intimate details of your life, how do you guys have a healthy counseling relationship? and still stay away from not getting too friendly, and because I get attached to people really easy.
I don't know. I think we've always just been able to kind of keep those boundaries. It's never been a concern for me. I don't think it's been a concern for him either. I think I feel comfortable because I know he is legally bound to keep my stuff private.
Yeah,
Um, if I,
unless you say you're gonna
yes, I
bring
mean,
harm to yourself or something like that.
even for myself, when I'm supporting someone, I tell them, whatever you tell me is in confidence. It'll go to the grave with me, so to speak. But
Mhm.
if you reveal to me that you're gonna harm yourself or harm somebody else, I'm morally obligated to report that because if I don't and you go and do something, um, I don't want to say stupid, but if you go and do something, um,
Catastrophic.
catastrophic, I have to live with that on my conscience that I didn't report that. So I hope
Yeah.
I answered your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And because you're in, the mental health first aid, are you considered a mandated reporter?
With the mental health first aid certification, I am not. However, there is documents that I signed with the mental health, with the mental health hospital that says that I will report anything like that. So, but I feel like I also have again, moral obligation.
Yeah, that is true. Well, before we wrap things up today, as I said at the beginning, Roy has his own TikTok, his own Instagram, which we'll all put in the show notes for you all to go check out. Roy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your videos surround and what you try to do on social media and how people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm more active now on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me at Roy Jones, ROYJONES, on Wheels on all the platforms. What I aim to do is literally spread awareness to mental health, offer encouragement. So in the mornings and throughout the day, you can always find encouraging things to lift you up. I also share things about my life because even though I am trying to spread awareness, I also struggle too at times. You
Yeah.
can also check out my website, which has all kinds of different resources for mental health and disability services. It's at royjonesonwheels.com.
RoyJonesOnWheels.com. We'll definitely put that in the show notes and put all your links up there. And I really appreciate Roy coming on today's program and giving a voice to mental health and those of us who struggle with it and being so open with what he struggles with. Roy will definitely come back to the show because we have a lot more to talk about. Today, we just wanted to cover his journey with mental health and how he got into it and how he's been able to help people. So I hope this has been able to help a lot of you out there. And please don't ever be afraid to reach out and get help for your mental health because if you're not right up here, and for those of you who are listening, I'm pointing to my head. If you're not right up here, you're not going to be able to love. You're not going to be able to love and support those around you and be around for those who need you. And so it's very important that you take Roy's advice and not worry about those who will judge you and get the help that you need. Yeah,
Mhm.
amen to that. Thank you, Roy. As I say at the end of every podcast, my goal is to get public speaking engagements and other podcast guests to come on like Roy and speak with me about their issues and what they struggle with and their story. So if you would love to do that, my email is nickspeaksofficial@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me there as far as any future public speaking engagements that you would like me to do, and we can talk about pricing and all that other stuff. And please tell your friends about the Nick Speaks podcast. Give us a good rating. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast. Remember, this is the podcast dedicated to the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud and give the disabled community a voice. Roy, thank you so much for joining us here today on Nick Speaks. Look forward to having you again many, many more times. And thank you so much for your time today. Guys, we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
And thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.